Earlier, though, I spoke with Democratic Congressman Seth Moulton, who's from Massachusetts. He was a part of that meeting in California. And I began by asking him if this week's meeting was the beginning of preparing for a wartime alliance with Taiwan.
Frankly, the first thing to understand is that what happened yesterday is not unusual at all. We have regular meetings with our Taiwanese counterparts. President Tsai has been to the United States, I think, half a dozen times since she's been in office. And, of course, we talk to other allies in the Western Pacific and all around the globe on a regular basis. What's really unusual and different here is the fact that the Chinese Communist Party is trying to threaten and intimidate not only Taiwan's officials, but American officials as well for just conducting this routine diplomacy.
I understand. I get that on one hand. But, look, tensions are pretty high. And these meetings are happening simultaneous with a congressional delegation that's on the island right now. I think we'll be meeting with President Tsai when she gets back to the island. What message should China and the Chinese Communist Party take away from these events?
The Chinese Communist Party needs to understand that our alliance is strong, and it's getting stronger. And, of course, it's getting even stronger, largely in response to the Chinese Communist Party's threats. Tensions are high because Xi Jinping addressed his nation and said that he intends to invade Taiwan. That's why tensions are high. It's not anything that we're doing. But in response to that, we're showing that our alliance with Taiwan is strong. We're shoring up our alliances with other allies in the Western Pacific. You just saw a major agreement with the Philippines, ushered in by the Biden administration. So we're standing firm and standing strong and making it clear to China and the Chinese Communist Party that they're not just going to roll over Taiwan as they seemed intent to do.
It seems militarily we're prepared to defend Taiwan, and we can argue about whether we have everything we need today to defend Taiwan. But just the different actions of that there is a willingness and an urgency to be prepared if this became a hot war. But it seems the bigger vulnerability, and it sounds like President Tsai believes the bigger vulnerability is essentially cyber influence, if you will. You know, almost hacking, misinformation, and undue influence in their politics that maybe gets a more Chinese Communist Party friendly government. What can the U.S. do about that?
Well, it's a great question. And just to be clear, all the things that we're doing, whether it's strengthening economic partnerships or building up the military deterrent on the island of Taiwan, it's all to prevent a war. It's all to deter a war. And we talked about how we need to accelerate weapons deliveries to Taiwan. That's something President Tsai asked us to do in the meeting. But we spent even more time talking about strengthening our economic partnership. She raised the possibility of doing a trade deal with Taiwan so that our economies have greater exchanges. And she said that having those solid partnerships, both between the United States and Taiwan, and then also between Taiwan and other countries that are allies of ours in the Western Pacific, that is an economic deterrent to China's aggression as well.
How concerned, though, is President Tsai about the fact that their biggest economic export, arguably these computer chips, is an industry we're trying to build here in this country, essentially just in case we lose Taiwan as a partner?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think that she sees this as a good partnership. Taiwan's not moving all its production to the United States, not even close. But they already have a production facility outside of Beijing. So why would they have a production facility outside of Beijing and not will have one in the United States? She thinks that's an important strategic partnership that she should have, and we obviously agree.
How does she view the war in Ukraine and how it impacts her in Taiwan?
I think all eyes are on the war in Ukraine and the lessons that we need to take for that from war in Ukraine to the Pacific. I think one of the most important things to recognize is the strength of our allies and the fact that so many allies have come together to support Ukraine. That's why we're strengthening those allies, those partnerships in the Western Pacific. But another important lesson to take away, as well as this war is going for us in Ukraine, is that ultimately deterrence failed. We're at war today because we were not successful at deterring Putin from invading, and that's something we don't want to repeat in the Western Pacific. So That's why it's so important that we do this work today. We don't want a strong alliance to come together after China invades Taiwan. We want it to be very clear to Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party that that alliance exists today, and that's why they shouldn't invade.
What was her take on what public opinion is on Taiwan between full independence, relationship with Beijing, or something else?
Well, one of the interesting points that she's made, and I heard her make this point when I was in Taiwan and leading a delegation there in October, is that the Hong Kong situation really changes everything for the Taiwanese people. Because for a long time, they believed that they could seek some accommodation with China, perhaps one country, two systems, exactly what they promised Hong Kong. But of course, we've seen the reality of that for Hong Kong. It's one system, one control, absolute control from Beijing. So that, I think, really made the Taiwanese people, and certainly many of Taiwan's leaders, say that's not going to work, and we're going to have to defend and prevent China from actually taking over.
I want to ask you a quick question about Afghanistan. We know there's more after-action reports that Congress wants to dig into. The White House has released something. We expect something from the Pentagon today as well. I'll be honest, I read the White House report, and it had a lot of President Trump in it, meaning they were essentially saying, look, we know that the withdrawal itself looked chaotic, but part of that reason was our hands were tied by all these agreements. Is that the right tone and attitude to take? Is that fair? I mean, it comes across defensive. Maybe those are the facts. What say you?
Well, look, it's not wrong that Trump did a lot of bad things that set our Afghanistan policy in a terrible direction, but there are a lot of bad things Trump did that the Biden administration wasted no time undoing. So I'm not sure it's entirely fair to say that our hands were permanently tied. Were they tied? Yes, but could we have undone them? I think we could have. I saw the New York Times headline that just said that one of the conclusions is that we should have started the evacuation earlier. That's something I was asking the administration to do for months, both behind the scenes and in public. I hope we learn some lessons from that mistake.
Congressman Seth Moulton, Democrat from Massachusetts. Again, thank you. Appreciate you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.